All big changes start with a swift kick in the ass.
Welcome to another episode of A Swift Kick in the Ass. This is your host, John Curren. Today is going to be an interesting episode. Have you ever thought about taking a mystery flight? Have you ever just thought about heading to an airport and saying, give me a ticket? I don't care where. Well, I'm bringing someone to you today who's going to be able to take you there. Who has a business that act in Australia that can take you basically anywhere in Australia. And I'm telling you, I'm so excited about this because I watch a lot of YouTube and have seen Tasmania and South Australia and Victoria. I've seen all these places in Australia, but she actually takes people there. Her name is Lisa Pagotto, and she's a pioneer in experiential travel, and she's committed to creating authentic and enriching journeys for people that want to avoid the crowds. So she has a helicopter and a plane, and I don't know what else you have, but Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's early in the morning in Australia, and it's late, it's early evening here in the States. So welcome to the show. But how did you get started in all of this? And I want to hear about how this came to be.
The entire journey. Sure. Well, firstly, thank you, John. Thank you for having me. So I guess if we go back 12 years now, that's where this part of my career started. Prior to that, I had been in the travel industry for around 12 years myself as an employee. And yeah, 12 years ago, there was, I guess, a crossroads in my career where above me was the CEO. There was nowhere for me to grow. I was getting itchy feet. I couldn't grow any further,
Yeah.
and I was getting quite frustrated. And I had a mentor at the time, and he said to me, "Oh, you've got such a unique skill set. You've done sales and marketing, you've built product, you've been a tour leader overseas. Why don't you start your own business?" And I just kind of thought, well, I'm not a brand. Who would travel with me? Anyway, he said, no, no, let me connect you with a few people in the media. Let me get you talking to a few people to sort of show you how that business world works. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea how to run a business. And he did. He connected me with a few people, and they all had the same response as him. Why aren't you running your own tours? And one person said to me, how long would it take for you to create 6 small group tours that were, quite outside the box, quite unique, which was my personal style of travel?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, about 2 months. And he said, come back to me in 2 months and I'll help you launch it. And so that's what happened right at the very beginning. And that was before I had the private air business. This was small group tours, which still exist, called Crooked Compass, which is very much outside the box, as you mentioned, experiential
Mm-hmm.
travel, really focusing on your more frontier and less developed destinations like places like Papua New Guinea and Mongolia, things like that.
Wow.
And so we launched that 12 years ago, and yeah, it just, the market was ready for it. They were looking for that what's new and what's next, and the business just sort of kept going like this. 18 months into that journey, I appeared on the Australian version of Shark Tank,
Oh, cool.
which set the business even further into, expansion. And all of a sudden, we had this 12-minute slot in primetime TV, and it just exploded. Our website crashed multiple times with the
Oh my, that's
traffic,
great
and
trouble.
it was a great problem to have. I had every media outlet wanting to talk to the girl that sold her house to fund this business. And it was just a whirlwind, an absolute whirlwind. And then the pandemic hit.
You sold your house to fund the business? Is that
I
what I just
did.
heard? I
Yeah.
wanted to
Yeah.
call that out. Oh my, so this podcast is about resilience. It's about personal growth. And you know, what is resilience really? But it's protecting yourself from adversity and external sources. There's all sorts of things coming at us, and we have to take risks uh, to make things happen. And you put up your house, when you believe in something so wholeheartedly, you always hear about people burning their bridges or like
Yes.
saying there's no path back. They don't think about there's only moving forward. So I commend you. I mean, I don't want to derail your story, but so let's just pick up right there. So you just signed off your house or put your house at risk, which
Yes.
is not a good feeling, but you're propelled by this dream of putting things together.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it was a very interesting period. Even just having that discussion, I didn't need a lot of money to start the business, but what I wanted to be able to do and to make sure that it could survive without us basically running on oily rags and eating beans, I wanted to have a buffer behind me. And it was, just thinking back to that moment, my now ex-husband, when I said to him, we don't have enough money for me to do this the way that I want to have impact. And, you're not going to be able to get a loan for a startup business when you've got no history, no
right.
traction. Um, I don't know, is it possible? Like, do we really need to be in this house that we're in now? And I really think that I've got something here, and that means that in time we could be in an
Yeah.
even better house, but
Yeah.
I just need something to start. And I was quite nervous to even bring this conversation up. And he was like, of course. I believe in you. If anybody can do this, you can do it. And it was just such a simple conversation. And I guess
Right.
it's one of those things where for me, I'd built up such a
Yeah.
situation in my head and it was just such a nothing. And so that was how that came around. And that's probably why I talked about it so casually as just a throwaway comment, because it ended up being such a simple conversation. And we just did it. And then now I have this. Um, but so after the Shark Tank situation, everything was going really well. The business went on this upward trajectory, and then the pandemic hit a few years later.
Mm.
And being in the travel industry, it was the most impacted industry on the planet. And especially being an Australian based business, we had the toughest lockdowns in the world. As everybody reminds me every time I'm traveling and someone hears an Australian accent and says, "Oh, what happened in your country?"
It,
And so the business went into reverse. I had to let my entire team go. It went back to being just me. We couldn't sell any of our international travel product,
mm,
and my marriage fell apart at the same time. And my identity was gone. I was
yeah, I
always on a
could
plane
imagine.
every 2 weeks traveling. My husband, that was falling apart. I had a 3-year-old child at the time, trying to navigate how to be a single mom, and I now had no income. And all I could think of was, I need to look after myself. I need to look after myself. I've built this before. I can do it again. I need to look after myself. I can't get caught up in the hype of how devastating this is for the industry. That
Yeah.
there has to be another option, because we could at that point still travel within Australia, and everybody was selling Australia because it's all we could sell, and trying to sell Australia to Australians was incredibly challenging because it's very easy to do yourself. And for me, the way that I had to kind of protect myself, I'm very curious minded. I don't do well doing nothing. And so I was like, what can I do to keep my brain active? That's when I become creative. That's when I see opportunity. And because I couldn't travel, I started just driving to little regional airports that weren't too far from where we lived, that I could get to, that were inside,
Hmm.
my little lockdown zone. And I was just working from there. I needed to get out of the house. I just needed a change of scenery. And one day at one of the little airports I went to, there was this flyer stuck on the wall that said, "Learn to fly." And I was like, wow, I could actually learn to fly. I've got no money to be able to do it. But
But
um,
that's never stopped us before, right?
yeah, maybe that's what I need to do. And like, it made no logical sense at all.
Yeah.
Like, nothing made sense. It's like the world's most expensive hobby. And at that point, like, our government was giving us wage subsidies because
Mm. Yeah,
businesses
because
couldn't
no one
afford to
was
pay.
working, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so I used my wage subsidy to pay for flying lessons. And that's how I learned to fly when I had nothing else to do. And as I was going through that sort of early phase of becoming a pilot, I suddenly was brought into this world that I'd never been exposed to before, of private aviation. I saw how many private aircraft were grounded. I saw how many private pilots were out of
Mm.
work. And my mind just started ticking. There's got to be something here. There's got to be something here. All of our commercial flights were grounded at that point. So no one could travel with commercial airlines. We were now in a state lockdown, so we couldn't even leave our own state. And my mind just kept saying, just don't push it. Just keep going. Keep doing your flying a couple of times a week and just
Hmm.
keep learning, keep learning, keep learning. And then one day I said to my instructor, I said to him, because no one's flying into Sydney International Airport at the moment, do you think that I could fly into Sydney Airport? Can we book a slot? And he was like, you're insane. This is just like not even a thing. And I said, well, why not? There's no planes using the commercial slots. Why can't we fly a private plane in? The airport's still operating for private aircraft. And he didn't even know if it was possible. And I just kept pushing, going, well, why not? Why
Mm.
not? Ask the question, ask the question. And he got a slot for me. And so I did. I flew my little plane into Sydney Airport, a tiny little four-seater plane, onto, this 4 kilometer runway. And there was just the stacks and stacks of grounded aircraft on all of the side taxiways. And that again, it was not planned. There was no strategy behind it, but that just sparked this idea of, okay, commercial flights are grounded. We can do some pretty incredible things with private
Yeah.
planes. And that was where the Crooked Compass by Air business started with the mystery flights and doing the multi-day private touring. And not necessarily, it wasn't me flying out our clients. We were utilizing these private pilots that, you know,
Yeah.
were all missing out on work. And there were so many different aircrafts that we could use. And so that then gave me the edge to be able to take Australians to parts of Australia that you wouldn't normally do
Yeah.
independently, like remote cattle stations and, true outback landing on dirt strips. And so that is effectively what saved the business. And then once borders reopened 2.5 years later for us, that business just died because we were all like, get us out of here. We are done with being in Australia. Let's all go back overseas. And so the international business picked back up, and this one
Went
wound all the
down.
way down. And so what we've done since then is reposition it for the US market.
Okay.
For Americans coming to Australia who are short on time but do have the expenditure, to be able to take them to, not just Sydney, the Rock and the Reef, but to be able to take them to these remote luxury station stays or cattle stays or witness things like mustering from the air and all these things that are iconically Australian that you just would not find in a regular brochure. And that in
I,
a very quick nutshell is kind of the journey as to where it all started and where it came from.
you know, like I said before, this show is about resilience and about like what can you do to deal with adversity. And your story just hits at the heart of that. I mean, really, just looking back, I mean, hearing you talk about your experience, you know, you were trying to do something for yourself. Just, just get out there. But as you started to get curious and learn about things and start taking chances, like learn how to fly, you start seeing the world in a much different way. You're really using what you have at your fingertips to make the best out of whatever situation or circumstance you're in. Man, you just did that perfectly. I mean, what a success story. Um, and people, a lot of people here in the States, um, I think really do crave adventure and want to go outside. I haven't really been outside of the States that much. And in fact, this podcast has a huge following in Australia and New Zealand. So I've been telling my wife, I was like, I got to figure out a way to go. And I think I just met my person who can help me make that happen. So I think I'm probably going to put something out here on the pod on my website. And actually, I don't need to do that because I already have a group of friends who are like my brothers from another mother.
Yes.
I've known these guys about 40 years because because we met when we were teenagers, and
Amazing.
and this would be a lifetime adventure for us, and there's six of us.
Oh,
So,
perfect.
you know, so but we'll see because we have, wives and such and girlfriend or whatever. So
Yeah,
it
yeah.
might be bigger. But no, this sound, I mean, I was looking at the website, I was like, oh my God, that just looks so cool. And um I've been watching these shows where people take the Land Rovers or the, off the I don't even know
Four-wheel
what
drive
the yeah,
vehicles.
the four-wheel drive vehicles that can't and they just camp out on the beach and they
Yeah,
fish and they catch, I just
very hunter-gatherer.
yeah, I just, it's just gosh, what an adventure. I don't know if I'd want to leave, quite honestly. Until I saw like the big spiders or the big what the monster creatures that you have down there. But I
Everything that's out to kill you.
yeah, I think it would be just totally amazing to do. So, so how are you? So you're targeting the U.S. markets now. This is going to go out all across the U.S. I mean, this goes out around the world, but big following in the U.S. So, how do people best get in touch with you? Is it through the Crooked Compass by air? Is,
Yeah, for the private air business, definitely through the Crooked Compass by Air website. We have, yeah, I mean, we've got our newsletter that you can subscribe to, or of course our phone number or email address, whichever is easiest for you as your mode of contact. We also have all of our social media channels as well, where there's obviously opportunities to reach out that way if that's your preferred style of
yeah.
communication.
Okay. No, that's great. So it is the crookedcompassbyair.com.
That's it.
And perfect. Perfect. I love your stories. Thank you so much for sharing. Um,
Yeah, no problem. I mean, that was a very, very abbreviated version
yeah,
of
no,
it.
no. I mean, you covered a lot. I mean, you covered so much. Um, yeah, you covered a lot of time and very concisely. So this is you're tracking the U.S. and going to do this, and just seems like, I mean, your other arms of the businesses are operating just as well. So it really just making adjustments and um, you're keeping busy.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of those things, and I think that the pandemic, the travel industry is such a volatile industry.
Yeah.
There's always something. There's always, like at the moment, there's Ebola. We've got the Middle East situation right now. Otherwise, there's always a volcano that's interrupting flights, or there's,
Yeah.
some sort of geopolitical challenge that is impacting something. And obviously, the pandemic is kind of the biggest
Right.
version of those kind of catastrophes, hopefully in our lifetime. Hopefully, there's nothing beyond that. That really sort of made you reassess how resilient you as a business owner and your business needs to be. And, it could have been very easy for me to say, oh, we'll just shut down the international business and we'll keep the private air business. And then when that quietened down, when our borders reopened, we need to really rethink this strategy and who are we going to target, because Australians don't want this anymore. And so that needed a completely different angle, while this one was starting to take off because it was what everybody wanted.
Hmm.
And there were so many times where I had this conversation with myself, oh, how do I juggle the two? They're very similar in
Yeah.
style, but they're very different in clientele and in, price points as well. And as things started shifting, particularly this year with what's been happening over in the Middle East, being where we are in Australia, it's we're so isolated, and the media play a significant part on how our consumer sentiment responds. And, for us traveling overseas, we use a lot of the Middle Eastern carriers like Emirates, Etihad, and Qatar. They're the three biggest airlines to travel with overseas from Australia. And our government has do not travel on the UAE,
Oh,
which
okay.
means they're not insured. And so you constantly have to have these conversations with, well, that's impacting our international business again. We switch more
Hmm.
focus across to this one. And then, you've got the two to kind of bounce between and adjust as global situations fluctuate. And I feel like whilst they were both created with no clear plan to specifically do that, it has created a really robust and resilient business, because we can respond to different
Yeah.
market situations without being back in that situation that we were in the pandemic where we were stuck because this couldn't trade. And so we had to create something or die. And now we have both. And so there's just
Yeah.
so much flexibility and so much more robustness in our model. And that all came from building through all this uncertainty and not knowing what was ahead.
I think too, you are very scalable. So you could turn it down, you could scale it down
Yes.
when it's not in demand. So you just turn down the heat. That product is still there,
Yes.
and you can turn the levers and turn it back on when you want to. Um,
Absolutely.
I think that's a great way to deal with resilience. I mean, to deal with adversity, is you have products that address the market at that time, but recognize that the markets do change and things happen. And um, especially, I mean, with the world is just in chaos
Yeah.
nowadays, and whether it's war or politics or whatever, but life really does go on. Uh,
It does.
Without it, I mean, like people get married, people have children, people go on vacations. These terrible things that happen are not everywhere in the world, and I think we need to be reminded of that. But I love that your approach to building, your approach to adversity, and it seems to me like you're keeping your eyes open just on the industry and just everything that could impact that industry. So you're really ready to make other adjustments and you probably see it even coming down the line because of your experience in the industry as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's one of those things where resilience is built off the back of experience and knowing what works, what doesn't, and strengthening that kind of that gut feel that helps you have a bit of foresight. Sometimes, not always, is accurate, but 9 times out of ten it is. And there's just yeah, as you say, the world is in chaos and there's so much unpredictability. So it's very difficult to say, this is what our strategy is going to be for this year. Let's stick to it and let's do it. It just doesn't work like that right now. And so literally everything that we do, and we've done a lot of work on it this year in particular, because we've had the capacity with things being downturned a little bit because of the Middle East war, is to review our systems so that exactly as you say, we are scalable. When things get quiet, we can reduce costs quite quickly without reducing manpower. When things start to get busier, we can turn it up. We can adjust as we need.
Hmm.
We've got the Middle East is a big destination that we operate in. We can't do any of that right now. So all of that is turned right down for now. It'll come back and there'll be some other area that will, it'll swap between. There's something will happen in South
Yeah.
America and that'll have to turn down and this will turn back up. And then, something will happen in both. And so then we lift the Australia business back up. And that's something that we've spent a lot of time this year making sure we have that slick. It's been very clunky kind of learning on the fly. And now that we've seen what we've done works, it's okay. How do we make this smoother as opposed to a bit of a knee-jerk reaction? We can see what the signs look like. We can see what happens when the phones stop ringing. We can see what happens when website traffic increases but inquiry drops, which is always a very interesting indicator in our space. And how do we adjust accordingly so that we're not
Hmm.
backpedaling all the time? I think when you have a small business, you do have that ability to be nimble because there isn't red tape, there's not hierarchy of different layers
Hmm.
to have to get approval through. You can be very fast with making snap decisions. And, I think that that's been one thing that's been incredibly beneficial for us.
Sorry about that. I thought I
That's
put
all
my
right.
phone on silent. That's just startled me. Oh, sorry to interrupt the flow there. What you're describing really reminds me of what my dad used to tell me. He says, kind of take it from this business level and business mindset to a personal level and apply it to a personal level. When you can't always expect to be in good times.
Yes.
So their life is full of good and bad, and it's a mix of it really all the time. Sometimes it's going to be more good than bad, and other times it's going to be more bad than the good. whatever it is. So you have to prepare during those down times. And it's not maybe it's not even saying good and bad. It's just the way it is now and the way it is, later. I mean, think that you have to adjust to change. And you also mentioned too the way that you know things are changing. You're looking at your call volume, you're looking at the website, uh, looking at, you know, how you interact with your customer. And again, taking it to a personal level, you can look to see, you can measure these things, certain aspects of your life. And by doing that, it's going to make your life so much more stable, I think,
Yes.
and healthy. And you have a very healthy business because you're able to adapt and adjust accordingly. I mean, talk about, resilience. And I mean, not personal growth, this is business growth. But I really think that it applies very well. There are a lot of parallels, I think, to
Yeah.
what you do in business and how you live your life. I think you take aspects from both and apply them. But so you're not planning for a year and ahead. You said you're not even looking at year ahead. So how far ahead are you look? I mean, you really have to be very nimble. Um,
Yeah, I mean, when I say we don't plan a year in ahead, we have a high level plan a year ahead, but we know that that's not going to be the reality of
mhm.
how it plays out. So we know what we want to achieve, we know our sales targets, but we can't sit there and say 25% of our sales are going to come from
Okay.
Australia, 20% are going to come from Asia, because that shifts the minute something flares up somewhere, even if it's a natural disaster. So it's more about this is what we need to achieve from a dollar perspective, from a revenue turnover. What does that look like in terms of passenger numbers? Let's work backwards. Our average sale is X. That means we need to get this many bookings per year. That means we need to get this many quotes because our conversion rate is this. And we work backwards that way and literally work off that sort of metric data, as opposed to saying, okay, 20% of our business is going to come from Australia,
Mhm.
so 20% of our marketing spend should be allocated to Australia, because it's not as clean cut as that. I mean, that sounds very logical. But people, our product is expensive. We're a premium product, and people plan 12 to 18 months in advance. So it's quite rare for us to have an inquiry of someone saying,
Okay.
I want to do something next month. So the short term
Yeah.
is the easy things to plan for because you know what the market
Okay.
conditions are. The long term, which is what our clients
Okay.
book because they're paying off, expensive journeys.
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
point. Yeah.
yeah, it's quite different. And so you have to kind of find a balance between the two. And that only comes with trial and error and experience.
Yeah, you know what? I was thinking, I have a friend that got one of my friends that I mentioned before got remarried recently, and they went to Africa
Okay.
for their honeymoon, Tanzania and wait, no, I'm just thinking of what I read on here. Uh, I think they did go to Tanzania though, and Zanzibar, and they
Yes.
just, it. But you're right. You plan for these things, 12 to 18 months ahead. But by the time it gets there and getting closer, I mean, there can be a lot of nerves involved, especially like, say, you planned for a trip a year ago, and now you're dealing with that
Yeah,
trip coming
disruption.
up, and there is
Yeah.
total disruption. Um, but you're built to accept that, as that's just the way things are, and you just
Yeah.
try to make the best. You pivot as appropriately, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's an interesting challenge in itself that we face because we're so used to this constant disruption and chaos and nothing ever going smoothly in our industry
yeah,
just because of the nature of what it is. Like we are literally impacted by everything from fuel to Mother Nature to tribal conflicts to politics. And So we're used to having those conversations. We're used to having plan A, B, and C. We're used to having conversations with, we can't do that, but we can do this. But for the average person who might go overseas once or twice a year, that's terrifying.
Right.
And, they worry about we've saved so
Oh, and
much
it's a
money
big
to be able
deal.
to do
Yeah.
this. Yeah. And I
It's
don't
a
want to get
bucket
stuck.
list,
And
really bucket list
exactly,
item.
exactly. So there's a whole nother layer
Yeah.
around navigating, communicating that to people. And it's not about just getting the sale because you already have the sale. It's about reassuring people that we literally deal with this chaos day in, day
Yeah.
out. So we have the experience to know how it's possibly going to play out on the ground. We can give you all of the information possible and help guide you to what you feel is the most appropriate decision if you're considering rescheduling, canceling, or proceeding. And yeah, it's very confronting for the consumer at times, particularly in markets like what we're in right now.
Yeah. No. Yeah, it's just crazy. But I think it's a very healthy way to, I mean, not only look at your business, but to really just look at life because
Mm.
we can't control these external things that happen. But, on the negative side, we have the war and all the chaos shutting things down, but we also will hopefully have truces or some agreements or things that can also change things overnight and reopen.
Literally overnight. Yeah,
And so you
literally
need to
overnight.
be prepared for that to happen, and position yourself. Sounds like you have done that.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a really clear example of that, and that was in February this year when finally the Israel-Gaza ceasefire held. And I said to our marketing team, we had everything set up to switch back on our Middle East advertising because it was all switched off. And it was all good to go. We had the budget allocated for when I gave the green light. And the ceasefire had held for a couple of weeks. And I said to our marketing team, nobody else is going to do this, but we are. We're going to get hate for it. We're going to get praise for it. We're going to get all of the above.
Hmm.
Go. Switch on our Middle East ads, start promoting Israel again, start promoting, Saudi Arabia, all of those regions that are usually very strong for us. And the inquiry and the bookings were like that. They were instant. It was just, and I was like, wow, okay, we've got this
Yeah.
right. Literally 1 month later, the Iran situation starts and we switch it off again. Um, but we were ready to go. And so we were right. We knew that the market wanted to go
Yes.
there. And, people who do want to travel to places like the Middle East, they know that it's an area that is always going to be in conflict, but there's just these small windows where you can actually go. And so they know that the minute that things stabilize, you go now. You don't wait 2 years to book that one. You go when you can because that window could shut again. And that is
Hmm.
literally what happened. It was very, very interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
So let me ask you this. So as an American, I know a lot of
Yes.
Americans are scared to travel
Yes.
outside, especially right now. What do you have to say to them? I mean, I think some fear is what keeps you alive, but it also keeps you from not really living either.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
how do you take a calculated risk, um, to kind of hedge your bets to so you're not putting your life in danger, but yeah, I don't know how to even frame
yeah,
that.
it's
You
it's
know, to
interesting because yeah, I've just come back from the States. I was just there for the past fortnight and um it's a very interesting sentiment and speaking to other tour operator owners, there are some companies who are carrying US travelers who are putting extra security on their tours because they're carrying Americans and I'm going, why? What is that for? And I think it comes down to depending
mm,
on where you're traveling to. And don't talk about politics. It's like the number
right.
one thing that causes problems is do not,
Yeah.
everyone has their own opinion and it's a very divided topic. And I think, yeah, I mean,
So
I
even
get it.
on the planes, you're saying that the concern is that the people will talk about the politics on the planes and get into fight. Is that why they have
No,
security?
not on the
Or
planes, but on tours. When
oh,
you're on a tour,
on tours. Okay.
yeah, you become mates with the people that you're
Yes.
traveling with very quickly. And naturally, just because people are curious and people like to have an
Okay,
opinion,
and it
if
can
you're an
change.
American
Yes.
traveler, people do want to ask about US politics. And, the sentiment that I understand is that it is the last topic that people from the US
Yeah.
actually want to talk about. And so there's automatically this tension. And so that's within the dynamics
Okay.
of a group already. So my advice would be just to try and shut down any political talks because everybody has their own opinions. And but I think when choosing travel destinations right now, to choose destinations, and I mean, it sounds pretty unfair to even have to consider this, but if there are specific destinations that have a specific approach towards American people, just
Hmm.
stay away from those destinations for now. It's
Yes.
purely political, and don't unnecessarily put yourself in a position where you will be uncomfortable. And I think as well. Yeah, some of it's unwarranted. Some of it is very media driven as opposed to the reality. Like, for example, an American coming to Australia is just a non-issue. It's just not even a problem. Um, and yeah, it's a shame to have those kinds of conversations. I have an American lady traveling with me to Kazakhstan later this year, and she has dual citizenship. She's also got a Maltese passport. And she said, "Oh, there's no way I'm traveling on my US passport." And I said, "Well, what
Yeah.
difference does you don't need a visa for either of them?" And she goes, "Oh, no, no, I don't want them to think I'm American." And I went, "But you are."
My friends who travel, they actually their sons just graduated from college, so they went to Europe for
Yeah.
a visit and went all over. My friend did not want he did not want to wear a baseball cap. He ended
Yes.
up buying different hats from different places to protect his, pate. And
Yep.
and but did I think that's generally what people do is they try to blend in and
Yeah.
not look American.
Yeah. Or say for the uneducated who can't pick the difference between a US and a Canadian accent, I'm actually from Canada, is another one that we've heard quite a lot of.
Right.
And it's just a shame that anybody should
It
have
is.
to even
I agree.
contemplate, yeah, having to do that.
No, I agree. And that's why I asked because, I agree with you. I think the media does blow things out of proportion and they paint a picture that may not really truly represent the reality. And that's what I've seen happen in the news myself here in the States, whereas there was a part of, and I hate to even mention the Capitol because it's political,
Political. Yeah.
but there was they painted this picture. They showed a picture of like all the graffiti and it's just a really run down and like crime infested area. And they were talking about all the everything that was going on there. And I was in that area the day before, and it was nothing at all like that.
Yeah.
Nothing at all
Yeah.
like that. And I'm thinking, but no one is there to say, yeah, that's to stand up and say, no, that's not happening the
Yeah.
way
Or
they're
that's one small
portraying it.
street.
Yeah, or that's
Yeah.
one small street. And yeah, you know better than to avoid that. Um, so I like to show, we call this swift kick in the ass because we like to disrupt conventional belief
Yeah.
and conventional thought. And so I appreciate the insight from, and outside of the country. I don't get a much input from outside. So I love hearing
Yeah.
from outside, just from a real person who who sees things. You're in such a position that to see what's around the world.
We do. And we're very lucky because a lot of the destinations that we work with, they are very stigmatized. And I will put the US in that basket right now as well. The number one thing that I often say, especially if I'm on the radio over here, no matter what country I'm talking about, whether it's the US or a Middle East nation or somewhere in West Africa, the people are not the government. And
Right. Yeah.
that's what the media do. They say, they focus on what the government is doing right or wrong, and then they label that is what the entire population is like. And that's where all of this stuff comes from. That's just so inaccurate.
Yeah. So I think we're running out of time here. I want to make sure I cover this. What do you suggest, like as an American, never been to Australia? What would you suggest, like for a first time going over there? Because
In terms of
Australia
what
is a
to
big place.
see,
Yeah, it's a big place.
it
Um,
is.
so how 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 do you get the best bang for your buck? I mean, like like where do you go to? Because there's a lot of different choices.
There are, and I think a lot of it comes down to how much time do you have. That's really the starting point, and then working backwards from there. Because the biggest misconception, particularly with people from the US coming here, is because everything is so close for you guys, everything's so
Yes.
accessible, and then you come here and everything is so spread out. It's not accessible the way that it is in the US, and so that natural conception is brought over here, and we literally live on the coastline of our country. There's very little in the center. And so time is the biggest factor. A lot of people come here thinking that they can cover the whole of Australia in 2 weeks, and you can't
Uh,
even do one state well in two
Okay.
weeks. So it really comes down to, when you think of Australia, what is it that comes to mind that attracts you? Is it the cities? Is it the beaches? Is it the outback? Is it the rainforest? Is it the reef? Is it the indigenous culture? Is it the wildlife? And literally making a list of what is important to you. And then that's basically the starting point with how we work with our clients to work out. Okay, so you're interested in swimming with whale sharks. Well, that means we have to go to Western Australia, which means we probably can't do the East Coast. We need
Mm-hmm.
to focus on the West and maybe the Northern Territory. And we have those kinds of conversations. The benefit of traveling with a private plane is that you can literally fly straight into so many properties without having to work with flight
Okay.
schedules, and having to pick up a car or meet a driver and then drive to wherever you're going. Like you just reduce so much time by having that accessibility. Also, too, it depends on the season. Like
Okay.
what season
Oh,
do you want to experience here? Like our summers, depending on where you are, can be incredibly hot or they can be incredibly wet,
and the
depending on
time,
which.
yeah, and the
Yeah,
timing of the summer, right? Because,
we're opposite to you guys.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, so
So
you
in,
escape your winter, come to
okay.
us for summer.
I like that. Okay. That's good. That's another reason I love doing the show because I always learn something and I didn't realize that it was switched like that. I mean, I figured
Yeah.
something, I knew it was different, but I didn't realize how much. Perfect. It's so cool. I'm so inspired by this. And um, your journey and your story of how you built your business and what you've created is just, I mean, sounds amazing.
Thank you.
What a great story. It's very inspiring. Um, food. What's like I guess if you're interested in food, what
As in
can you
Australian food?
yeah, what do you recommend is like the best Australian food?
Well,
What do you
I
have?
wouldn't say, yeah, we don't really have a cuisine, so to speak. But because most of our population is on the coast, fresh
Okay.
seafood is very popular. We do a lot of barbecues, and very different to like your American Texan barbecues. Our barbecues are very different, quite often with seafood and prawns and sausages and steaks. And yeah, a lot of our dining is outdoor dining because of our weather. So lots of picnics, lots of barbecues in the
Mhm.
park, those sorts of things. We don't really have like really heavy, hearty
Okay.
type stodgy food. Our climate we just don't
So
need that sort of thing.
so I one thing I do also want to mention too, uh, you do special like proposals and
We do.
special dinners. And just imagine, a helicopter, being helicoptered out to some remote island and sitting there on a beach, watching the sunset, having a dinner in the middle of basically
Yeah.
nowhere. That was such a cool thing. But what's the like the coolest or most memorable proposal or story that you have?
We have both proposals and elopements. So we have some quite
Oh,
unique stories where people want to do something incredible, but without the family politics attached. And so, they'll jump on a
yeah.
private plane or a private helicopter. So we've got a few. We had one that was a surprise elopement. So we have a celebrant that we work with that we can put on the aircraft. And she obviously was fully aware because she had to get all of the legality side of it drawn up. But the fiance didn't know that this was going to be a surprise elopement. And so there was kind of like half the paperwork filled in and the other half was blank because she had to sign it. And so what we did for this couple, there's it's a merino sheep station, and the guy was a farmer. The girl grew up on a farm, but they moved to the city for university and kind of never went back to the country.
Uh-huh.
And so that the property that they ended up having their surprise marriage in, so there were family there, so they weren't on the plane, but they were already at this, like the shearers' quarters had been lit up with fairy lights, and there was catering and a private chef and everything. And they flew in on a private plane onto the grass airstrip next to the shearing shed. And she didn't know what they were doing. She thought that it was just like a surprise day trip type of thing. And then walked in and everybody was there and it was set up as a wedding and they got married,
Wow.
which was incredible. That was very iconically Australian, being in a shearing shed. So we've had that one. From proposals, probably the most exciting one we had was in South Australia. This was with a helicopter. And we landed on beaches. This is in a national park. And the helicopter landed, they have GPS coordinates as to where to land. And what the fiance had done was get like an esky, I don't know what you call them in the US, a fridge box, a chili
Okay.
bin, cooler, yeah,
Okay.
filled with French champagne, and it was buried under the sand. And so, and in there was the ring. And
Oh
so the
my God.
helicopter landed, and the helicopter pulled out these like folding chairs or whatever, and the girl was kind of like, what are we doing here? And he's like, oh, we're just doing a private sunset on the beach. And so she thought, oh wow, this is amazing. And then he
Yeah.
started digging, and she's going, what are you
Yeah.
doing? And he dug out this esky, and then out comes the French champagne, out comes the glasses, and then out comes the ring. So
That's a great
that was,
story.
yeah. And then there were the photos that we got sent. There were like emus, wild emus running behind them in the sand dunes, with
That's
little chicks.
awesome.
So very, I mean, we didn't plan the emus, but yeah,
That could
that's
get
another very cool
costly.
story.
There are a lot of emus out
Exactly,
there.
exactly.
No, that's, what a wonderful way to make a living, quite honestly. Now, are you still flying? I mean, did you get you got your license and
Yes, but I haven't kept it up because you now need to keep your license current, you need to fly every 14 days.
okay,
And unfortunately, I don't have the time to be able to
right.
do that anymore. So yeah,
Wow,
it's lapsed.
you have to fly every 14 days to keep your license.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow, that's
So
really I
that's under
didn't
our
right,
aviation
right.
authority. Yeah,
Well, that's regardless, you're making it happen. And to have that also have the experience as a pilot too, and I mean, just even though you could always go get it reinstated if you wanted,
exactly.
you have that knowledge. But I love it. I love your story. I love the energy that you have about it. And um gosh, I love that you're going to make a lot of people happy um in
Yeah, it's
this.
very rewarding.
It is. And you planted a seed also with me to get my buddies to go on this Australia trip.
Yeah, boys
So
trip down under.
yeah, so we might have to we're gonna have to get back in touch after this. But
Absolutely.
I already asked for I already told long day. It's not morning here, it's it's evening. Um we already gave the website, and it is crookedcompassbyair.com. And Lisa Pagotto, thank you so much for your time and your stories and just the passion that you bring to it. Um, so enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Have a great morning and enjoy your day. And
Thank you.
to my listeners, I hope you enjoyed this story. I hope it took you someplace, and I hope now you plan to go someplace and go someplace exciting like Australia and take the crooked compass by air because I think it sounds really cool. Uh, write me if you have a great story and want to share it. But until the next time, peace. Hope you got your ass moving. Until then, until the next time, I'm out of here. Peace.